return to a world that was very different from the one they'd left. And maybe it didn't feel like a return to real life. But I don't know. Dad never talked about it. We especially didn't speak of my burgeoning non-binary soul. I don't think my parents had all the skills necessary to parent an LGBTQ child. And I think they lacked the skills needed to parent healthily, period. My parents used almost every tactic they could to try to get me not to be me, and that included withholding affection and manipulating, as well as many carrots and sticks. I also experienced violence. At a very, very, very early age, I learned that if I was going to be me, if I was going to thrive, if I was going to dance, if I was going to have freedom, I would have to build a new life for myself. I would have to imagine new possibilities for myself. I would need to save myself. In our current world of TikTok, Instagram, and out and proud celebrities, it's hard to imagine a world where I felt I was the only one like me. But I can remember questioning if I was born on this earth, wondering if I had traveled here from a different planet, before Will and Grace was on TV, the first Will and Grace, before Queer Eye, the first Queer Eye. I felt all alone so often. My mom would eventually become a pastor, and I always felt like I was lying to God. When I was 6, another kid from my church told me that God would never accept me. He said that if I didn't change the core of who I am, I was going to hell. And that hell was another word for the ultimate separation from God. So, I immediately started to memorize the Bible. I became the perfect Christian. My theory was that if I could remember every Bible verse, if I could have a favorite Bible verse ready for every occasion, if anyone suspected me of the very dark, evil, and awful stain of being LGBTQ, that person would immediately think, oh, no, not Jeffrey. Jeffrey's too good of a Christian. Jeffrey couldn't possibly be that way. Well, it turns out I was very much that way, and I learned that I could lie to the adults and the children around me. But of course, I felt like I could never lie to God. God sees everything. God saw me. But I feel like you saw me too. That when I was in the barn and twirling in my glittering skirts and being free, being me for the only time in my life, kicking up my heels, you were there. I like to joke with my very close friends that our inner children knew each other. Our inner children were friends when we were all growing up. And that's what it feels like in my imagination. I was surrounded by people clapping, laughing, having fun, hugging, and enjoying each other's presence. As a child, anyone was welcome to dance with me. I felt like I would have died for anyone to come into that barn and love me for who I was. I would have been delighted for anyone to wear a skirt with me, or whatever their version of a skirt was, and dance and have fun. I almost died waiting for and wanting that kind of family. And here we are. That's why I never take for granted our relationship. I never take for granted the chance to speak to you. And I never take for granted the opportunity to tell you a little bit of my story, the things I've seen, and the things I've learned along the way. I thought about leaving more than once. When I found Buddhism, I had some of the most joyous feelings of self-acceptance I have ever known. At one point, when I was living at a Buddhist monastery in California, I experienced intense feelings of despair, more intense than I have ever encountered in my life. Like any good spiritual path, my Buddhist training amplified and intensified all my feelings, sometimes all at once. Your light will always balance out your dark. I was preparing to return to the outside world at 30 years old at the end of a particularly extended stay at the monastery. It was 3 a.m, and I was meant to leave the following afternoon. I was in a dark place. We, as Buddhist practitioners, stayed on the monastery property in little huts.